Welcome to Cycle Breakers and Moneymakers, a podcast for women of color and first gen who are breaking generational cycles and glass ceilings by going places no one before them has ever gone. I'm your host, leadership coach, and eldest daughter of immigrants, Mariela De La Mora. I left a 16-year marketing career to create a multiple six-figure-a-year coaching business as a single mom. Each week, you'll learn how to build unshakable self-trust, become in demand, lead with confidence, and make more money by being more of who you are. Hey, y'all. So you are going to want to tune in to the end of this episode. I will just start by saying that because I'm going to announce how you can get coached by me for free, literally beginning this week as of the release date of the podcast and for the next 3 weeks. So ongoing for the next 3 weeks. And I'm only allowing access to you, my podcast community, and my email community. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. If you're already on my email list because you get the podcast notification emails through being on my email list, then you already know what it is. I'm so excited. I literally have never done anything like this before. And it's related to what we're going to be talking about in this six-figure self-trust series. So this week, next week, and the week after, I'm going to talk about self-trust being the number one business skill, leadership skill, and something that I see by far is the most common thing that is lacking in especially women of color and daughter of immigrant entrepreneur clients of mine, and even in myself. In fact, what I would say is that lack of self-trust is one of the most expensive and silent problems affecting women-owned businesses, especially, like I said, if you're a woman of color and first gen. And that's because it can present in so many ways that actually feel like productive. Like you are investing in different programs, like trying to find the thing, and you're getting certifications, and it just is very sneaky. And across the board, like this is something that I've witnessed, not just in myself and in my clients, but in peers as well, where sometimes you actually start with this level of almost like naive confidence, and then it feels like you lost it. And that's why I'm talking about it, because it's just so important for us to understand how it's showing up for us. So through this series, through the six-figure self-trust series, I am going to be talking about how it shows up, why it shows up, what areas of business it affects. That's what I'm going to talk about today. And then what happens when you, like how you actually work through it and what happens when you're on the other side of that. And then we're going to talk through like some tangible ways to do that. This is going to be across the 3 series, but for today, I'm going to talk about why lack of self-trust in business is an issue, how it shows up, why it shows up, and start to talk through the different ways to work through it. The reason that I'm talking about this is because, like I said, it is just so common. And what happens is it affects the way that you market, it affects your confidence, it affects the way you show up, and it affects your demand, right? It affects lots of areas, but ultimately we're talking about you creating demand has to come from like your self-belief, self-trust, and being visible, right? So it tends to affect 3 main areas that I have seen. Number 1, you're second guessing your marketing. So you're like, is this the right thing? Is this the right message? Is this working? All the things. It also affects underpricing. So I will see underpricing because you're undervaluing your expertise because you don't fully recognize it. And so I'll see that all the time where I'm just like, okay, so you've done this, and then how much are you charging? And it's just, it doesn't really matter as much if the market, you could command a certain price, but your belief isn't there because you aren't seeing yourself and you're not valuing your expertise, then you can't charge that, not because you can't, but because of your identity and your belief, right? So again, you really having self-trust and believing in your expertise. When you don't have that, underpricing is the second issue I see. The third issue that I see is you're watering down your thought leadership because you're not trusting in it. You're not trusting in your unique difference. So then you're in comparison and you're making yourself wrong because you're saying something or doing something that other people aren't doing, when in reality, that's like your $1 million gift or angle, right? The 3 main areas, you're second guessing your marketing, you're underpricing because you're not valuing your expertise fully, and you're watering down your thought leadership. This is all, I'd say, the most common ways that self-trust infiltrates you and your business. So until you fully relearn the skill of self-trust, you will keep trying to outsource it to different programs, different coaches, different figures of authority in air quotes. So I'll just explain to you why really is like the majority of getting to six figures and even multiple six. So most of getting to six figures, like I said, is self-trust and safety. So for me, even getting to $250,000 a year was self-trust and safety. And yes, you need like marketing and sales skills, but those skills can't be accessed without self-trust as a skill first. And as a skill, meaning you will always have it. You will have self-trust across the board, but you have to relearn it. And looking back, like once I had an offer as a coach, like once I actually was like, oh, what are the mechanics of my offer? How do I explain it? All of that. And then like running a sales call, like those tangible things, that was pretty much the last time I ever needed actual strategy from my coach. Now you might think differently that like, no, I need actual strategy. But what I'm saying is you probably need 10% of what you think you need when your belief and your self-trust are high. Because you're going to come up with ideas and concepts. You're going to come up in your highest level thoughts about yourself, and you're not going to need a lot of the strategy. Sometimes what we do is we use strategy or we ask for strategy to prop up lack of self-trust and belief. And from that point on, after the last time I needed actual strategy, like I had an offer and I was selling it, from that point on, all of the coaching questions that I asked my coaches were, I may have asked marketing and sales questions, but I was responded to mostly with self-trust and safety. So like I said, the questions sound like they're about strategy, but it's really about like you building up your identity, building up your self-trust as an entrepreneur. And just through that alone, there was a year in 2021 where I really lost my self-trust and my belief, and my income dipped, and I thought I needed to get a job. I started to look for a job. I'm going to talk about this actually on the next episode. So this is a little bit of a preview. But that year, the year that my self-trust, I just felt like I was in this black hole, like this abyss of it's not going to work. I felt so ashamed. I was super deep in money scarcity. That year, I was able to make more in the last 2 months of 2021 than I did in the first 10 months of 2021. I made $80K in the last 2 months of 2021 when I had made $70K the first 10 months. And I'm going to talk about that on the next episode, how it was self-trust. Self-trust in my marketing, self-trust in my expertise, like belief in my expertise, and self-trust and belief in my thought leadership. Those are the three areas, right? So, and I'm going to talk about that there, and I'm going to talk about that in the announcement that I'm going to make at the end of this episode. And if you're on my email list, you already know what it is. So those three areas we're going to talk about. So let's talk a little bit about why this is an issue and kind of how it shows up. So one of the things that I have heard that I do agree with, but it's an I agree and. So I have been told and heard that when you hire a coach, you need to listen to your coach and just trust your coach. Yes, absolutely. Ideally, that is what we want. We want to hire mentors and leaders and folks that we believe in and that we trust. However, I have seen that it is difficult to trust your coach if you are in a season of struggling to trust yourself. And the reason for that is that you need to make a decision to trust your coach. And if you're struggling to make decisions, then you might not know if it's a good idea to do the thing you're doing, right? So it's, should I trust my coach? Like, this doesn't make sense to me or whatever. And I always would say, no matter what, you always should know why you're doing what you're doing. And sometimes we don't ask that because we think, oh, they're telling me to do it, so it must be right. And maybe I'm not being coachable. Like, you have to ask. And if you're struggling, if you're in a season of you're not really trusting yourself and you're struggling to decide and you're really stuck in your head, then it's hard to decide that I'm just going to listen to my coach and that's a good idea. Because that in itself, I wouldn't even advise, because that's still outsourcing your self-trust. That's, I don't trust myself, so I'm going to trust you. And that's not a long-term solution, because then that begins this pattern of I'm going to invest in mentors because they're going to tell me what to do. And I'm not okay without them. And yes, you should always be getting coached. I'm always getting coached. I'm in 3 masterminds right now. I've always had someone, with the exception of 2 months, which were like horrible months in 2021, where I didn't have a mentor. The way that you show up to coaching is going to be different when you are actually being coached to build up your self-trust. You're going to ask different questions, right? And so I don't even advocate for hire a coach and then just trust them, because again, that's still outsourcing the self-trust. It has to start with yourself, and that creates dependency. And this is why I say to my clients, and this is a goal of mine, is that I want you to leave every single interaction with me with even more clarity, with even more self-trust, knowing why you're doing what you're doing, knowing why you're marketing the way that you are, why is the decisions that you're making, where you're being visible, all those things. I want you to know why. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to talk about why this is happening, why self-trust is so challenging in entrepreneurship in particular, and how it shows up, and then how it affects your business. And then I'm going to end it with what you can do about it to start to get to support on it, because that's part of this announcement that I'm going to make. So, number one, why self-trust, lack of self-trust is so common is that we were not conditioned to trust ourselves. If you were conditioned as a woman, you were not really conditioned for the most part, depending on your upbringing, to trust yourself. A lot of it was especially if you're a woman of color or first gen, a lot of it was you have to listen to your parents, you have to do as you're told, not talking back, or just even if you asked questions or you were no, it wasn't really necessarily met with patience and understanding, or someone saying, hey, you're right, or hey, I can see where you're coming from, or oh, that's just not a very common experience. I think a lot of us were conditioned to just center the comfort of other people and to be nice and supportive and correct and precise versus to trust ourselves. And so much of that, or even to be praised or to have these accolades, and all of these things are external, which is why we don't really see a lot of the times where our self-trust really ranks until we become entrepreneurs. And the reason for this is because until we become entrepreneurs, we're pretty much in structured environments. If you think about school is pretty structured. There's steps, there's a syllabus, there's a curriculum, you know exactly what you need to do. There tend to be more right or wrong answers until you go to college. And at that point, you're doing a lot more making a case for the things that you are making a case for, right? Sometimes I would write a lot of papers like that. And same thing with the workforce. The workforce has rules around, okay, you need this qualification, this degree, these skill sets, this level of experience. So you know exactly kind of what to do. And it also doesn't feel personal. At least with work, I just remember it being yes, I want to do a good job, but it didn't feel like a personal rejection of me if I didn't hit a certain mark, right? And it's also different when you aren't earning a paycheck and then your ability to earn money depends on how you feel. That's where it starts to get activated. So the reason self-trust starts to come up so much in business is because of that, is that we're not really in an arena that requires that as a skill to the degree that you do when you're an entrepreneur, which challenges so much of the way that you see yourself. It could just be really triggering. And so what happens is that I'll start to hear it and it comes up in this way. I'll hear, I know that I should do this, or I know that I'm supposed to do this, or I don't know who to listen to. Sometimes it will come up like that. Or maybe your brain just feels really loud with do's and don'ts. Oh, okay, you're trying to do something, but then you're trying to run it through all these processes. And at the end, you're just I don't even know if this is the right thing. And you're not listening to yourself because your brain is just very noisy. Another thing that I've heard of how lack of self-trust will show up in my clients is that when they come to me, they will have this experience of coming from other people's programs, and they'll say, I thought that other people's processes worked for everyone but me. And I thought I was the one person it didn't work for. I was the one person that couldn't execute. And it's not that it's fully your fault. Sometimes what happens with that is that you are learning something and you don't understand whether or not you should apply it or how you should apply it. And that spins you out and you don't ask the question, because that just happens. Or maybe you do, but you don't feel safe to continue asking, to be I just don't know if this is a good idea. And you might be coached on implementing the process versus being coached on making a decision about the process. You see what I'm saying? See the difference there? Being coached to follow a process versus being coached to make a decision about the process relative to how it makes sense is a little different. And it all depends on someone's philosophy, right? That doesn't make them wrong. I just think that sometimes what happens with this high achiever, perfectionist brain, with the good student brain, with the black and white thinking we tend to apply, it tends to be interpreted as, oh, I'm being taught a process. I need to throw out everything I've been doing. That will happen without us even realizing. Is you come in, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed sometimes at the beginning of like your entrepreneur journey. We tend to have this like naive first year where we're just like, yeah, this is great. I don't know. We're just going to put this out there. We're just going to see. And sometimes you experience a lot of success, not really thinking about it. And then you go and learn a process. And then you're just like, wait, so I have to do it in this way. And you stop doing what worked for you before because you're trying to fit your actions into this process. So that's the good student mentality of trying to apply things perfectly. So this is all just what I've seen and even how I have done this. Like I do this too. I did this recently. I looked back. I'll just give you the story so that you can understand how this shows up. I am now repurposing some of my old content, like for the first time. I've pretty much written all brand new content for 4.5 years. So I'm now repurposing content from like end of 2021, 2022, because I'm selling one-on-one again. So I've got some spots opening up in August. And so I was like, oh, I'm just going to go back and resurface some of my posts from just all of that time. And what I noticed was I was like, I never put a freaking CTA. Ever. I don't think I put a CTA like, book a call with me and here's what I do in my one-on-one program. I just told stories and people wanted to work with me and I've been booked out like literally since the end of 2021. Even after I raised my prices to 10K, 15K, all the things, stayed booked out, multiple clients, people waiting 3-4 months to start with me. And I never put a CTA. And I didn't have a clear result. I used to sell a bunch of different results. I still do because I can help people with a lot of different things. So in many ways, I was not following processes. Does that make the process wrong for people who do teach it? No, because it does work for people. But I have just not been somebody who needed to follow a process to make money. I've made almost $1 million, probably 3/4 of that, maybe 2/3 of that was one-on-one. And I never put a freaking CTA. So I just remember going back, I was going through my content bank and I was repurposing it. And then I was like, wait, I can't just repurpose it just like this because there's no CTA. And then I started like getting in there and rewriting it and putting all the stuff. And then I was like, okay, not to say that I shouldn't put CTAs in my content, but like, why is it that I'm now with present brain me who's learned all these new concepts? That's the thing is, now I'm in multiple programs. So what happens is your brain starts to get busy, too busy and loud. And then you look at stuff and you're like, this isn't good enough. But in the reality, I'm like, bitch, you booked out. You made hundreds of thousands of dollars selling with story, not having a clear outcome and not putting a freaking CTA. People have commented to me like, how is it that you are selling so much when I don't even see you selling? I don't see you selling in the way other people sell. So I've just created my gift, which is I sell without selling. I also sell straight up, but my gift is, you know, I'm a brand. I've built a really strong personal brand. I'm very vulnerable in my storytelling. I'm very much embodying a lot of the things that I teach. I'm very transparent. I've anchored into my thought leadership so much so that it doesn't matter that I'm not putting a CTA because nobody is saying what I'm saying, right? And also people are smart. They know how to freaking book a call. I've been booking clients one-on-one, even though I haven't been marketing it. They know how to go to my website and look at the stuff. Y'all know how to look and find it. And so this is an example of, I noticed that I was in a season of not trusting myself when I went back to literally look at posts that had made me money. And I was like, this isn't correct. I have to follow this framework and there's no like offer story attached to here. And what's my skill and what's the outcome? And so here's the thing is that those things work. Those processes can work unless you start to spin out about it, in which case you got to anchor back into, okay, what am I really trying to say? Right. And so when we just wipe that slate clean and we're like, I have to apply this process, that's going to spin you out no matter what. So this is why processes work better when you are anchored into self-trust. And like I said, self-trust affects marketing. So this marketing meaning you're learning someone's process, you throw out what you were doing and then you replace it with this process. And then all of a sudden your sales dip. So it affects marketing. It affects how you value your expertise and it affects your thought leadership and you trying to fit in, right? So just wanted to share that story because that is a perfect example of something where me trying to fit into a process, like, why am I going to try to do it now when it worked before? Like, why am I going to try to fit into a process when I didn't need to? And the thing is now is that because I have self-trust, I'm able to be like, oh, okay, I know when it makes sense for me to sell and sell an outcome. And that's when I'm selling reclamation, because reclamation is a mastermind and reclamation needs a clear outcome because people want to know what to expect, because I'm not going to be meeting with them individually every week. With one-on-one, I don't really need to, but like I know this in my brain now. So being able to make decisions about marketing, how people buy, what's important to them, why it makes sense that you're doing it that way. That is a leadership skill. And that is what I teach my clients. That's what you're going to learn through this series and through this announcement at the end of the episode, is how to make decisions about things and go, oh, I understand why I'm doing this and why this works. So then you know what to throw out and you know what to take and you know what to double down on. And that changes everything, because then you are not going to be dependent necessarily on one person or anything really to give you the answers, because you're going to learn the skill of self-trust. You're going to learn the skill of marketing. And that is going to change everything for you. So that was just a side story of like how it shows up when you lose self-trust and how you start to try to throw a bunch of stuff out that has been working. I share this with you because I want you to notice where in your business or in just your interactions are you sitting in a noisy brain? Where in your interactions now is there something you want to do, but you're not doing it because you're like, does this make sense? I don't see anybody else doing it, or I need somebody to review this, or I just don't know. Does this make sense? Is there something you used to do that you stopped doing because you made yourself wrong for it? And is there something now that maybe you're in a coaching program that you aren't quite on board with? Or you're just not sure about how to apply it and you're not asking the question and you're just sitting it and like silently like struggling through it. So these are all kind of ways that self-trust can show up. Maybe it's something that used to feel easy and now it feels hard. And now you're telling yourself, or maybe if you were doing something before, you're like, well, I'm too far along now, or I've experienced more success, so I need to be more structured. And that will also happen as well, where you're just like, I can't do that anymore. I used to do that, but I can't do that anymore. And I'm like, why? This on its own, solving this can make you so much money. Like most of the money that I've made, my best quarters, my best months, my best launches, my best years were when I was sitting and trusting myself. My clients, when they have made the most money has been when they have trusted themselves. Like I have so many examples of clients that have done that, where they have hit their biggest months, their biggest quarters. They've hit their entire annual goal in half the time, in 5 months. Like they're all in my reclamation stories. If you go on my feed, they've doubled and tripled. It's like the collapsing timelines. And that's why I say that self-trust is the skill that collapses timelines. And the reason it collapses timelines is because you're not actually changing your offers. You're not actually changing a bunch of stuff. What you're doing is you're figuring out what is it that's made me the most money, that feels the most easy for me, and how can I double down on those things and make my gifts public? And how can I double down on those things, which ends up meaning that with less effort, you actually create more and attract more. So what you're doing when you are anchoring into self-trust in your marketing, self-trust in your thought leadership, and self-trust and belief in your expertise is that you actually are lowering your resistance, you're upping your belief, and then you're taking a bunch of stuff off the table, a bunch of rules, a bunch of shoulds, a bunch of extra actions that are in your action line that you don't actually have to do. So you wind up doing less and making more because of that. I'm going to share more on the next episode about what that looked like in terms of how self-trust has allowed my clients and myself to be able to make more money in a fraction of amount of time, where like it feels ridiculous. It feels like it makes no sense, where you can collapse timelines, and how it comes down to self-trust, like I said, in those 3 areas, because I want you to start to notice where the unraveling is happening in your own business. Is it in marketing and sales? Are you sitting and doubting your marketing and sales? Are you sitting and doubting your expertise? You're not experienced enough, or like your years of experience. Are you using years of experience against yourself? Are you sitting in comparison, imposter syndrome, all of that? So that's expertise. And then the third area is your thought leadership. This is where you're making yourself wrong for being different. You're making yourself wrong for not having a clear example of someone who's doing what you're doing or saying what you're saying. So if you're in any of those 3 areas, this self-trust is the answer. And I'm going to talk to you more about what that looks like and systems and all of that that you can create for that. So with that, I hope that this was helpful for y'all. I want to invite you to opt in to this exciting thing that I am announcing. I'll tell you more at the end of this episode, but like I said, you will be able to be coached by me for the next 3 weeks on rebuilding self-trust in your marketing, self-trust in your expertise, and self-trust in your thought leadership, and how that on its own, even one of those areas, even one, can double your demand. It can double your income. My clients have done it just with one area, not even all three, just one, in the first 3 months that they were in reclamation, or just the first few months of us working together. And when that happens, all the things you think you need to do just go down. Like all the noisiness, all of the, oh my gosh, but I have to do this and I have to add that and I got to do this and I have to run it through this framework. It just gets quieter. And this, I would say, is especially true if you already have something that you've offered, sold, delivered, and you've done it. So like, you know what you're doing, but you just don't feel confident about it. It doesn't feel secure and stable. It feels like it's up and down. It feels like you only get your sales like in certain bursts and then it's really dry, or it just feels really hard because you're fine-tooth combing everything, or you've been doing well, but there's something more you want to step into and you're scared because you don't really see an example of somebody doing that. This is also for you. You might just be in the thought leadership stage, which is where, okay, I've done this thing, I've served my clients well, but I just feel called in this direction and I feel like it doesn't make sense. And I don't want to throw out what I've been doing, but I feel like I want to talk about this and I'm just not sure. Does this make sense? I don't see anybody else talking about this. This is also for you. So sometimes you're at a point in your evolution where it's no longer about making sales, like you're doing okay, but you're feeling called to expand. You're feeling called to step more into thought leadership. And now you really need self-trust because there isn't an example. And there's a part of you that knows that if you did that, so many things would change. Whether that's you're going to make a ton of money or you're just going to be seen in a different light, you're going to step into an arena of your own. This is all part of what the systems and the frameworks and the approaches that I've created that you're going to fill in yourself, which is what you're going to have at the end of this series, is going to allow you to create. So this isn't going to be my frameworks. It's my little skeleton, but you're going to fill it in with your own stuff. So I'm very excited to bring this to y'all. It literally is just me having observed myself, my peers, my community, my clients over the last 4.5 years, and really realizing that this is part of how business inspires us and calls on us to heal and reclaim a lot of the things that we've outsourced. And self-trust is one of the things that we have outsourced to figures of authority, to parents, to teachers, to bosses, many of us to partners, to whatever. We've outsourced it. And being successful in business requires us to reclaim that power, to reclaim this self-trust, which is why the folks that make the most money and are the most peaceful are the ones who really have learned to rebuild the skill that was often taken from them or that they didn't get to ever fully develop. And that's the secondary side benefit of this that is so beautiful, is that you can run a profitable business with a mostly quiet mind where you absolutely know that there's nobody like you. There's no one doing what you're doing or saying what you're saying, that there's truly no competition. There's no way you can get it wrong. There isn't anyone fully to compare yourself to, and that you know exactly why you're marketing the way you're marketing. You know exactly why the channels that you're using are the channels that you're using, right? That you don't even need to use social media, right? If you don't want to, you understand why you're doing what you're doing. There is nothing like that. And having ways to bring yourself back into that confidence when you do lose it. That is what makes entrepreneurship feel like something you don't have to escape from, recover from. It actually makes your business a natural extension of your belief in yourself, of your self-trust, of the way that you see yourself. And that's what I want for all of you. Join me next week's episode. I am going to be talking about how I made more money in 2 months than I did in 10 because of self-trust, and the examples of how marketing, expertise, and thought leadership were part of that system of like how I allowed self-trust to be infiltrated in those areas and how I got it back. I'll also talk about how this has looked for my clients and how even just one of those areas of rebuilding self-trust allowed them to also do things like hit their annual goal in half the time. There were a lot of like doubles and halves, like doubling a goal in half the time or hitting the goal in half the time. There was a lot of that, which has just been fascinating to me, where I really looked at, wow, this feels like magic. But like ultimately, you couldn't create results like that if it required an overhaul. You can only create results like that when you're doing less and you're doing more of what works and you're really just doubling down on your gifts and your beliefs. You only create results like that when belief goes up, identity goes up, and then action goes down. So that's what we're doing, is we're building up identity, and then the actions can go down because you're taking fewer actions from that identity and that self-trust. So I will see y'all next week in the part 2 of 3 of the 6-figure self-trust series. I'm so excited. Thank y'all for being here with me. I hope that by the end of this, you really feel like I know exactly what I'm doing. I feel unstoppable. Like that is my goal. Even if all you're doing is tuning into the podcast series and not into the coaching series that I'm going to be announcing. All right. I'll see y'all next week.
Now, what if I told you that there is one skill that will make or break any business strategy, regardless of what program you're in, what coach you're working with, or what your income is? And that is the leadership skill of self-trust. Self-trust powers your first 100K to $250,000, regardless, like I said, of what your business model is, regardless of strategy. I've seen it. I have experienced it. I have coached on it. I've seen my clients create the results from this alone, integrated into business strategies. And I will share more about that. So self-trust affects 3 main areas of business. Number 1, it affects your marketing. You second guess your marketing because you think it needs to look a certain way. Oftentimes you stop doing what's working. Number 2, belief in your expertise. When you don't trust your expertise, you tend to underprice. You're not giving yourself credit for all of the transferable skills that you are bringing into your offer. Number 3, just thought leadership. You start to water it down because you don't see anyone else doing what you're doing, saying what you're saying, and that requires self-trust. When you water that down, it affects demand, it affects pricing, it affects your mindset. By resolving just one of these areas, this is how my clients have hit their income goals in half the time without changing anything else in their business. You don't have time to change everything in your business. If you could clean up just one of these areas, that alone has created these results in my client's business and in my business. And that's why I'm offering a level of coaching I have never offered to the public before. And that is the 6-figure self-trust leadership series. In this exclusive series, I'm going to help you integrate self-trust into your actual business strategies, affecting your marketing, affecting your mindset and your belief around your expertise, and affecting your thought leadership. So by opting into the series, which you can do by visiting my website, marieladelamora.com, and also visiting my link in bio, you're going to be able to access all the parts of the series. So 1 is a podcast series on cycle breakers and money makers, where I'm going to be talking about self-trust as a strategy, the most common areas that lack of self-trust affects business results and demand. So you're going to want to tune into that. Number 2, and this is private, and you have to opt in order to get this, is access to a private Telegram broadcast channel where I'm going to be dropping voice notes on these same topics. I'm also going to be choosing questions in that channel to respond to via voice note and offer coaching. Number 3, a workshop is coming July 17th, 3 ways to double your demand using self-trust as a strategy. So tune in. You're going to want to opt in, get access to all of this. I've never offered this level of coaching before. And stay tuned as well, because only for those who opt into the series, the doors to reclamation are going to reopen briefly for those who still want to join the July cohort. You're not going to want to miss this.